Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jacqui, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. Today is the fourth episode in our Emotional Intelligence Summer Series, and we're talking about empathy. And empathy in leadership is really key. So we're going to talk today about empathy without being a pushover. So before we get into it, let's define what empathy is, because I think for some people, the definition of empathy isn't that clear. So Jacqui, define empathy for us in this context.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this. So empathy is a skill rather than a character trait or a personality trait. And I think the understanding of empathy often is someone who has an ability to feel someone else's pain, an ability to really sense what's going on for other people. And while those things can form part of the skill of empathy, in an emotional intelligence perspective and in a workplace perspective, empathy is the skill of being able to accurately anticipate and understand how other people are feeling or may feel in a given context. It's not absorbing what they're feeling. It's not changing your behavior necessarily based on that information. It's just that ability to pick up what is actually going on for somebody, even when they're not spelling it out.
Yeah, and I think it's a really key point, isn't it? Because if somebody isn't spelling it out, then it's up to you, isn't it, to explore it, get under the skin of it. So I suppose the next question is, why does it matter from a leadership perspective?
When leaders are able to understand and predict other people's emotions and feelings, that has a massive number of benefits. So in terms of trust, people will often open up if they feel understood. You get better information, more data. They will often be able to be challenged while still feeling supported, which helps performance, because we know that both a combination of high support and high challenge is what helps people to increase performance. But also, if you think about that ability to read the room, that gives you greater influence. When you're sat in those key high stakes meetings, people are more able to be influenced when you can consider what's going on, how might they react or respond, what might they feel if I propose this, how can I counter that? So all of that data and information and ability to understand others just builds so many different tools into your leadership.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think as well, it really plays into the credibility side of things as well, doesn't it? Because I think if you can show that you can handle emotional conversations without overreacting or underplaying them, that is really going to help you to build the trust. It's going to help you to build rapport. It's going to help you build that resilience within your team, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's another aspect, is when you have that ability to understand what's going on for people without taking it on yourself, then that helps you to have more resilience. And when others see that role modeled, you can have care and compassion and concern for others without having to take on the weight of their burden. And I think resilience is such a key topic for so many workplaces at the moment. And being able to find that balance is so crucial to protecting your own resilience, but also to finding the right level of challenge for others.
Yeah, definitely. And I definitely feel that from my early career, like my early days as a leader, and especially in a senior leadership role, I very much took on like all of those personal issues of my team. If they were feeling something, and I felt like sucked into that, and it drained me a lot in those early days. And now, obviously, you can still be supportive. You can still show that you care, but you don't have to get dragged into other people's personal issues and personal problems. And I feel like that is something that you don't ever really get taught as a leader or as a manager, and you don't really expect it until it starts happening. And then next minute you feel like you've been sucked into it and you're thinking, like, how do I now get out of this situation? Like, how do I create some distance? And that's very much like what I felt at the start, because people would share things and I would think I was being supportive, but I was probably being more sympathetic than empathetic. And I felt very much drained by those conversations, whereas I could have still provided support. I still could have listened. I still could have been there for those people, but I could have done it in a slightly different way. And I suppose that's where the balance comes in, doesn't it? So, how you then balance the way that you deal with that information and how you support those people.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of a conversation that I had recently with a client around exactly that balance, because their concern for their team, what we recognized through coaching, was that they were holding back from handing over work to their team because they had that empathy for the sense of, my team are feeling stressed, they're feeling overwhelmed. But then what that was doing was piling more onto their own shoulders, and they were doing work that really should have been done by their team. And what they could do is have the empathy and the understanding, and this was part of what came out from that coaching conversation, was to have that empathy and understanding that adding something in when somebody's already got a full workload can feel overwhelming, can feel stressful. So then you can have, as a leader, that conversation around, how do you prioritize? How are you approaching your work? How can I support you to make sure that it's really clear what you need to focus on and what comes first? So it's not, when you're over empathetic and you have that sense of, I don't want to do something that's going to cause a negative emotion for somebody, then that often results in you taking on too much. And like you say, ending up feeling drained and feeling exhausted. Whereas when you have that balance and you appreciate, okay, that's what's going on for them, that's how that might feel, how can we resolve that? And often it's a very different solution that comes from that than comes from that point of, I'm trying to avoid any negative emotion being felt by anybody around me.
Yeah, and I think there's a real fine line, isn't there? Because if you can balance the empathy and you can reflect the emotions back and you can create the space and you can offer support, that is going to keep things moving forward rather than you getting sucked in and feeling drained by that situation. And that was something that I learned the hard way, really, because it wasn't until I was in that situation and feeling drained. And actually, I first thought, like, maybe being a leader isn't for me. Maybe I'm not cut out for it. And it was only when, luckily, at that time, I had a really good mentor and I was able to talk through with her, like, what was going on for me and how I was feeling. And we quickly got to the root cause that I was given too much support. I was being overly, maybe not even overly empathetic, maybe more sympathetic and taking on the burden of their emotions and everything. And once I realized that and recognized it, it was almost like a light bulb moment for me, but it allowed me in those conversations to start actively listening a lot more, but then reflecting back to them. And that really helps. And it took a while. Like, it wasn't something that I was like, I recognize this. And the next conversation that we have, we're all back on track. It was like, it did take a while because I had to learn how to do that. And I think that's one of the skills that I felt as a leader. Like, it isn't something that you know that you need to learn. It isn't something that is actively taught, but it makes such a difference once you understand it, recognize it, and you start flexing that empathy muscle. It makes such a difference.
And I think that whole piece around balancing empathy with not being a pushover, a lot of the people that find that a particular challenge are people who struggle to set boundaries. And I think that often plays into it. So when somebody is developing that skill of delivering the right balance of empathy, actually, we often end up having to do work around boundaries, because it might be pushing back on work that is landing for you and your team and you don't have capacity for. You might have to have some difficult conversations pushing back. It might be that you have to have a difficult conversation about performance because somebody is finding something overwhelming when the expectation is that they can handle more than what they're currently delivering. So you might then have to have some difficult conversations. And I think that work around boundaries and work around handling those difficult situations is crucial to finding that right balance with empathy.
Yeah, definitely. And what would you say that some of the most common empathy issues are that leaders are facing like today? How would you describe those?
There's a number of things that I see. So not delegating stuff that should be delegated is a crucial one. And there's always that piece of it'll be quicker if I do it myself. But I think there's also a lot where people hold work and don't delegate because they feel like they might be asking too much of somebody. They feel like that might be detrimental to that individual's well-being, and instead they take that burden on themselves. So I think that one in particular is a really key one. And another thing that links to that is that for a lot of people who consider themselves to be empathetic, they have quite a need to be liked. And in management and leadership roles, it's important to be respected as opposed to being liked. So I think when people have that need to be liked, that people-pleasing tendency, then they can be high in empathy and high in the ability to read other people, but that then makes it challenging to take action on things that they need to address.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one that as well, isn't it? Because I suppose sometimes, and I know this has come up for my clients, and I'm probably guilty of doing it myself in the past as well, avoiding hard conversations in the name of protecting people. Because I think sometimes you think, oh, maybe that person can't deal with the truth, or maybe that'll be too much for them, or it might overwhelm them. But actually, you're doing them a massive disservice, aren't you, by not being honest and upfront? Because you're making an assumption that they can't handle it and you don't know. And then if you do talk to them about it and they can't handle it, then I suppose that's another conversation. But you've got to trust that, that person is another adult, can take on that feedback, can have that conversation, and then you can support them through it in whatever way that you need to. But I suppose you need to have those hard conversations from time to time, or maybe a lot of the time, depending on the person. But if you shy away from those, then you're doing yourself a disservice and you're also doing them a disservice, aren't you?
And I had that conversation yesterday with a client where they consistently get asked a lot of questions by a member of their team. And what they'd recognised is that they're falling into the advice trap, which we've spoken about before, of they give that person answers. They will go and do the research and give that person the answers that they found from research rather than challenging that individual to go and do it. And again, there was that sense of, in the short term, it feels like you're being nice. It feels like you're saving that person from being in the situation where they don't know what to do next, but you're not generating that skill from that individual of slowing down, thinking through, okay, do I need to ask this question? What could I do before? What solutions can I come to this conversation with? So yeah, I think there's just so many ways that it plays out.
Yeah, and it is. We could probably talk about that all day because, as you say, there are so many different angles to that. So, in terms of thinking about how to practice healthy empathy, because I think that's key, isn't it, for this conversation? What can people do to make sure that they're being empathetic, but they're doing it in a way that is going to work for them and for the people that they're leading?
So I think the first thing is to clarify your own intent. So to consider the actions that I'm taking, am I taking those actions because they're the right thing to do? Or am I taking those actions to avoid either my discomfort or theirs? So with a difficult conversation, for example, am I avoiding that difficult conversation because I would find it uncomfortable or because I think they would find that difficult? And therefore, in the short term, that feels comfortable, but in the longer term, it doesn't deliver what's needed. So I think that bit is really crucial. But also, and I think this is a really interesting one with empathy, consider whether you're projecting. So coming back to the delegation one, I had a client not that long ago who did a 360, and she was holding back from delegating because of a presumed feeling that this would add to stress and her team would find that too much. And literally 6 times in that feedback, delegate more, give us more. Why are you holding on to it? So I think you have to consider whether you're assuming how people are feeling rather than actually getting that clarity.
Yeah, it's so funny, isn't it? Those 360 feedback reports, I used to dread them myself, but they're so telling sometimes, aren't they? And we do make assumptions. I think it's just human nature, isn't it? That we make assumptions. And I don't care who we are and how much personal development that we've done or that we do. We still make assumptions because it's human nature. And I think it's good sometimes to check in with yourself and ask yourself, is this an assumption that I'm making? Especially if something feels hard, it's, am I making an assumption around this? And I suppose this is what we love about doing the podcast, because if we can just highlight some of these things to people to say, just take a minute and question yourself, it can make all the difference. So is there anything else that people can do to practice healthy empathy?
Well, just building, I guess, on that last one of really take the time to find out. I think reflective language can be really useful to sense check that understanding and to really know from the individual whether that is how they're feeling. So reflective language can be things like, it sounds like blah, 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 or what I'm hearing is. So you are sharing back what you either sense or feel or what you think you're getting from what they've said, and giving them the opportunity to confirm or to go, oh no, I don't feel like that. I feel like this. Or no, that's not going to be a problem at all. So I think when you use that reflective language and check, that really helps to avoid the risk of projection.
Yeah, and I think that you're absolutely right there, because you can project if you don't check in. And then I suppose you can also then open up the conversation so that you're supporting with solutions and not just repeating any old habits, behaviors, assumptions, and all of that kind of thing. And you can then acknowledge exactly what's happening without dismissing it, and then you can move on. And I think that really does help on so many levels, because it strengthens the trust in those relationships, it strengthens resilience. There's so much that getting empathy right can do to strengthen you as a leader, to strengthen your team, to help you deliver more as a team. So I do feel like that is definitely one thing that you should be thinking about focusing on. And I suppose in terms of an action for this week, what you could do if you're thinking like, how can I start working on this, is pick one conversation where your instinct is either to rescue or to soften that conversation, and pause. And then you can practice empathy, but you can make sure that you're holding the line. And if you are thinking, this is something that I'd like to work on, but I probably need some support in building that empathy muscle in terms of knowing how to do that and how to make sure that I'm doing it in a way that is going to work for me and my team, then me and Jacqui both available to coach around this, and we've got lots of different coaching options. And we've also got Career Club, which everyone is more than welcome to jump into at any time, and we'll put all the links in the show notes. But if coaching is something that you're considering because you want to improve your emotional intelligence generally, or you've been listening to the summer series and there's different elements that you'd like to work on, then get in touch and we will be able to talk you through the options that we've got available. And as usual, please share this episode with anyone that you think might find it useful. And don't forget to rate and review us on your favourite podcast platforms. And we'll be back next week with our final episode of our Emotional Intelligence Summer Series. So we'll see you back here next week, and we'll look forward to hearing from you.
Exciting news from us. If you're an ambitious leader or manager earning 50k or more and you're ready to take your career to the next level, we have an opportunity for you. Introducing Catalyst Career Club, your secret weapon for unlocking career success. As a member, you'll get access to monthly live training sessions, exclusive job opportunities, and the ability to get personalised advice from us on your toughest career challenges.
We've helped thousands of driven leaders like you secure significant pay rises, land dream roles, and thrive in their careers. And now we want to support you in achieving your most ambitious career goals too. Membership is just $6.99 per month with no contract or tie-in. And as a special bonus for being our podcast listeners, you can use the code podcast at checkout to get your first month for just £1. Head over to pamelalangan.com/Catalyst Career Club to sign up now, and we'll see you inside.